Okay, this passage is adopted from an article called Tales from the Pit by Andrew Curry at the Smithsonian Institution, which is in Washington, D.C. The Messel Pit, located in central Germany, is known for its fossils of mammals from the Eocene epoch. At some point around 50 million years ago, underground water came into contact with a vein of molten rock. High pressure steam erupted, forming a crater with steep sides. As water seeped in, it created a lake shaped more like a drinking glass than a soup bowl. Any animal that fell in sank quickly to the bottom. Still, that alone doesn't explain why so many land mammals, not to mention birds, bats, and insects, perished in the lake that became the Messel Pit. One theory is that carbon dioxide periodically bubbled up from deep beneath the lake bottom, smothering animals near the shore. Another possibility is that some of the summer algae blooms were toxic, poisoning animals that had chosen the wrong time and place to slake their thirst. Or perhaps smaller animals died nearby and were washed in by small floods or rushing streams. The lake was so deep that oxygen didn't circulate near the bottom, which meant that there were no bottom feeders around to consume the dead and dying animals. Year after year, algae scumming the lake surface bloomed and died, and so layers of fine clay and dead microorganisms drifted to the bottom. Each layer was as thick as a strand of hair. It took 250 years to build up an inch of mud. Over millions and millions of years, plants and animals were preserved like flowers pressed between the pages of a book, and the algae and other organic matter turned into oil shale. Among the thousands of fossils that paleontologists have recovered at Messel Pit are specimens representing nearly 45 different mammal species. Those finds are critical to understanding how warm-blooded creatures evolved. Mammals and dinosaurs appeared at nearly the same time, around 200 million years ago. But dinosaurs were so well suited to the environment that they crowded out any competition. Mammals lived on the margins, mostly tiny creatures eking out a living by eating insects under the cover of darkness. They just tried to stay out of the way, says Thomas Lehman, a Senckenberg Research Institute paleontologist. And so it went for nearly 150 million years. Then, in an instant, everything changed. Apparently, when an asteroid or comet struck Earth 66 million years ago and dramatically altered the climate, eventually wiping out the giant reptiles. The diversity of species found among the Messel Pit fossils reveals that mammals rushed to fill every empty ecological nook and cranny that they could find. They really tried everything: flying, jumping, running, tree-dwelling, ant-eating, says Lehman. From the point of view of evolution, Messel is a fantastic laboratory to see what life might have given us. Might have, but in many cases didn't. Messel's most fascinating specimens may be those species that have no living relatives, though they look jarringly familiar. In the visitor center, kids crowd around to watch as a conservator armed with toothbrushes, dental picks, and scalpels cleans layers of oil shale away from a fossil unearthed just a few weeks earlier. To me, the skeleton of Ailuroebus macrorhynchus looks like that of a giant squirrel. It's 3 feet long, including its bushy tail. Near the ribs, a black stain traces the creature's fossilized digestive tract. Despite its tail, Ailuroebus is no squirrel ancestor. It's an evolutionary dead end. Ailuroebus and all of its relatives died out more than 37 million years ago. Why? Maybe they fell victim to climate changes, or a better adapted competitor, or disappearing food sources, or simple bad luck. Ailuroebus' resemblance to a modern squirrel is an example of evolutionary convergence. Given enough time, adaptations may lead to nearly identical solutions. Bushy tail, say, or powerful kangaroo-like hind legs popping up in different species. It's like using the same interlocking toy bricks to build different forms, says Lehman. And there are forms aplenty at the Messel Pit. The exquisitely preserved fossils have provided paleontologists with unprecedented insights into the adaptive strategies, some successful, others not, adopted by mammals for feeding, movement, and even reproduction. For instance, the contents of the tiny prehistoric horse's stomach, fossilized leaves and grape seeds indicate that the animal was not a grazer, but a browser, eating what it found on the forest floor. The paleontologists also found 8 fossilized specimens of pregnant mares, each carrying a single foal. That discovery suggests that the early horses had already adopted herd behavior, since joint care would be the best way to guarantee the survival of a small number of offspring. So this messel pit is a window into the explosion of different mammal species that occurred right after the death of the dinosaurs, right after the asteroid collision that changed the climate and killed off the dinosaurs. The mammals were able to kind of grow and expand into that ecosystem after the dinosaurs disappeared. Okay, question 131. The main idea of the passage is that the messel pit is significant primarily because it, A, substantiates the theory that mammals appeared 200 million years ago. B, features fossils of mammals and dinosaurs interacting. C, contains fossils that reveal how warm-blooded animals evolved. And D, has fossils of dinosaurs that have not been found elsewhere. Who wants to hazard a guess?
C.
C is correct. Fossils that reveal how warm-blooded animals evolved, all the different species that they found, some that went on to be successful and their ancestors are alive today, and some that just died off. The main purpose of the second paragraph, lines 7 through 16, is to discuss, well, we have it right here, so we might as well take a quick look at it. That alone doesn't explain why so many land mammals perished in the lake. So basically, why did they die off? Was it carbon dioxide? Was it toxic algae? Was it floods that went into the lake? We really don't know. So it's discussing why so many animals fell into the pit. Okay. The main purpose of the second paragraph is potential explanations for the large number of animal fossils in the lake. I mean, it seems like a good answer. Conditions in the lake that led to the large number of dinosaur fossils, the toxic prehistoric plants that grew in or near the lake, feeding habits of mammals that lived near the lake. What do you guys think?
F.
F is right. Potential explanations for the large number of animal fossils. Why did they fall into this lake, into this pit? And they just hazard some potential reasons why they might have. The passage indicates that dinosaurs and mammals coexisted for approximately how many millions of years? What do you think?
C.
Okay, 66 million years ago is when the asteroid hit. But remember, the beginning of the passage said that mammals and dinosaurs appeared at the same time. But then dinosaurs disappeared. So how many years do you think they shared? If
B, 150.
Exactly correct, 150 million years. But you know, they were coexisting. But you got to understand that the mammals, you couldn't even find them. They were tiny. They were always hiding. They came out only at night, and they ate bugs. The dinosaurs were dominant until later on. Okay, in the passage, Ailurovis macrurus most nearly serves as an example of a species that, remember, it was a giant squirrel, but it wasn't really a squirrel. It died off. It wasn't really related to the modern day squirrel, but it looked like it. Evolved into a modern day animal despite competition? No, we know it didn't. Adapted to its environment in ways scientists hadn't seen previously. That doesn't say that. Developed physical traits that its modern day descendants did not inherit. Left no descendants despite its apparent resemblance to modern day animals. What do you think?
J.
Jay's right. Left no descendants. They died off, but they look similar. So what is this evolutionary convergence? Let me just give you an example. Birds and bats. Bats have wings, so do birds, but they're not related evolutionarily. Bats are mammals. Birds are reptiles, descended from the dinosaurs. And yet they both have wings. So that's because wings are useful. Wings help you survive, help you escape, help you find food, help you travel. So wings are a good idea, and that's the idea of evolutionary convergence. Okay, good job. 35. Based on the passage, which of the following scenarios most nearly represents an example of evolutionary convergence? A, several species of birds, each evolving a different beak. Well, they're birds and they have beaks, so They're not really unrelated. One bird species becoming extinct because of competition? No, that's not convergence, that's competition. Distinct species of birds developing wings that are nearly identical in structure? Well, that could be for sure, right? And D, many bird species moving to the same region because of food scarcity. So what do you think would be the best example of evolutionary convergence?
C.
You're right. I mean, they're all different species, but the wings look the same because apparently that particular wing shape is very advantageous, and evolution favors advantageous features. Okay, 36. According to the passage, the Messel Pit crater was formed by an impact from an asteroid, erosion from a river, steam erupting from underground, a volcano spewing molten rock. What do you think the right answer is?
H.
H is right. H is totally correct. The water somehow touched the molten rock, and the water turned into high pressure steam, and that basically eroded this deep pit, which they turned into the Messel Pit. So the right answer is definitely H, steam erupting. 37, it can reasonably be inferred from the passage that fewer fossils would have been preserved in the Messel Pit if the lake they were in had contained A, oxygen circulating near the bottom, B, layers of clay on the bottom, C, abundant algae on the surface, D, carbon dioxide that rose to the surface. So what would prevent fossils from being preserved?
A.
Exactly right, A, because oxygen at the bottom would support life, and that life would then eat the dead animals, either microorganisms or fish or something. So the fact that there was no oxygen meant there were no predators at the bottom and no foragers down there. So the dead animals just stayed there undisturbed. Okay, 38. It can most reasonably be inferred from the passage that mammals survived the impact that killed the dinosaurs because mammals existed in such large numbers, ate food that dinosaurs could not, had the ability to reproduce rapidly, were able to adapt to the change in climate.
J.
Jay is absolutely right. And why was there a change in climate? Anyone tell me? How did the asteroid change the climate? Anybody? So it was a big asteroid. It was moving very fast. When it hit the Earth, it dug out this huge excavated area, which, by the way, is still visible from space. You can kind of see it, and near the Gulf of Mexico. But all of the particulate matter, all the dust that was thrown into the air, blocked out the sun. So the radiant energy of the sun was blocked out. The Earth was surrounded by a gigantic dust cloud. And so the ambient temperatures dropped, photosynthesis dropped, plant life became less plentiful, it got colder. So there are a lot of climatic changes because of the impact sending this huge, unimaginably big cloud of dust that circled the whole Earth. Okay, good. According to the passage, by examining the contents of a prehistoric horse's stomach, paleontologists determined that the horse ate A, more grass than modern horses, B, many plants than modern horses eat, C, food from the ground of forests, D, food from a prehistoric open plain. What do you say? Anybody? Remember there were grape seeds and leaves? Yeah, food from the ground. They were not grazers. They did not eat grass. They ate stuff that was lying on the forest floor, like leaves and grape seeds. So they were foragers, food from the ground of forests. There it is. 40, based on the passage, which of the following pieces of evidence supports the conclusion that prehistoric horses had adopted herd behavior? Let's look at these choices. Well, let me read them. Specimens of pregnant mares were found near fossils of young foals. 8 fossils of mares were found with the same kinds of plants in their digestive tracts. Fossils of mare hoof prints that all pointed in the same direction were found. Fossils of pregnant mares that each carried a single foal were found. What do you think the right answer is here? Herd behavior. Okay.
J.
Anybody? Jay is right. So if you only have one baby, your strategy has to be to protect that baby. if you're a turtle and you have like, 60 babies, lots of them can die and you're still going to have a bunch of them that do survive, right? Probability is that the few will survive. But when you're only having one, you've got to be totally committed to protecting, preserving that child if your species is going to continue, right? From one generation to the next. And a single horse cannot adequately protect the foal, the baby, which is why they think that the horses were already engaged in herd behavior, because it would take the
我
whole.
准备在我直播里。
What's that, honey?
Oh, sorry, that was my bad.
Oh, yeah. So so it took the whole herd to protect one foal. So when the reproductive strategy is to have only one, you got to protect it. Just like human beings, they don't have many kids, but they protect their children, right? As opposed to a turtle that lays some eggs and walks away, and then all the turtles are born. Most of them get eaten by birds when they're running to the ocean, but some of them survive. So that reproductive strategy is numbers, just huge numbers. Whereas the reproductive strategy of these ancient horses was protection of the offspring. Similar to humans, right? Similar to humans. Okay, so the next section that we're going to do is going to combine lots of different things. So hold on one second. Just gotta grab something. Okay, this is an interesting exercise. Again, these short passages can be tricky because sometimes you don't quite know what they're looking for, whether it's a grammar issue or a wording issue or an emphasis issue. So we'll kind of work through these, okay? And we'll see what we get. We're doing sandscape stories because we did the octopuses last week. In her sand animation performances, artist Ilana Yahav tells stories through a series of images she creates by operating a layer of sand on a glass surface. So let's look at the first underlined section. In her sand animation performances, comma, that's appropriate, right? Because that's a dependent clause. It's a prepositional phrase. In her sand animation performances, comma, artist Ilana Yahav tells stories through a series of images. Okay, let's stop right there. Now, this is the no change answer, but there's some other things. There's a comma here and then a comma between artist and the name and a comma after the name. So this one sequesters off the name with commas. This one just has a comma between artist and the name with nothing afterwards. And this one says performances artist Ilana Yahav with a comma at the end. So this has a comma on both sides of the name. This has a comma at the beginning of the name, and this has a comma at the end of the name. And this one has no comma. So what do you think the right answer to this is and why? Anybody? Okay.
C.
Okay, so let me explain to you. So the best way to tell whether or not you need to set off the name, the proper name, is to pull the name out and read the sentence. Now, I'm going to read it. In her sand animation performances, artist tells stories through a series of images. Does that make sense?
Yes.
No, it doesn't, because it needs an article. It needs a the artist, right? In her sand animation performances, comma, artist tells stories through a series of images. If you said the artist tells stories or an artist, that would be okay. But without that article, it's not grammatically correct. So because this cannot stand alone, you do not need to sequester this. This actually is a descriptor of this. So these should be together. Okay? And so the right answer here is no change. Okay? But if you had seen a sentence that said, in her sand animation performance, comma, the artist, Ilana Yahav, then you could put commas before and after the name, because you could pull that out and the artist tells stories through a series of images would be okay. So always pull the name out and see if the sentence makes sense, if it's correct, And if it's correct, then you can cordon off the proper name with commas. Okay, through a series of images she creates by operating a layer of sand on the glass surface. Now look at that verb, operating. I can operate on a patient, I can operate heavy machinery, I can operate a telescope, right? Is that really the proper verb for that situation? Let's look at some of the other answers. We have operating, no change, manipulating, leveraging, which means kind of borrowing or using, and contriving, which means kind of sneaky planning. So we know that H and J are wrong. Do we want to leave it as operating, or do you think a better word for what she does with the sand would be manipulating?
G.
G is right. And this manipulating comes from manos, the Greek word for hand. She's using her hands to manipulate. So it makes much more sense. Operating is much less specific, and it doesn't really fit. She's manipulating layers of sand, moving them around with her hand on the glass surface. So the right answer is definitely G. Good job. She works on a glass tabletop that's partly lit from underneath. The scenes she forms projected onto a large screen in real time. Viewers must watch closely because each story Yahab tells cascades by images that last just a second or two. So she's constantly changing what you see on the screen by manipulating the sand. Okay. To tell a story, comma, Yahab clears sand from the center of the glass. Okay. To tell a story. Now, does clearing sand tell a story?
No.
No, it doesn't. So this is not appropriate. So let's look and see. What other choices? When starting a performance, using only her hands as she works. What do you think the most appropriate phrase would be for that sentence?
C.
Using only her hands to have clear sand from the center. Okay, so here's the thing. The thing that you wanna emphasize here is that she's clearing her palette. She's getting ready for a performance. Okay? So how would you bring that, how would you emphasize that?
B.
Yeah, B. Because what she's doing is she's getting ready to tell a story. So when she's starting a performance, she clears the sand from the center of the glass. That's really the emphasis there, is that she's getting ready now to show you stuff. She has to clear the sand in order to begin the show. So the right answer here, the most appropriate answer is B. Okay? Because the act of clearing the sand is really the beginning of the show. As she shapes the sand around the edges of this space, silhouettes of images, such as the outline of a face, appear. Okay? Silhouettes appear. Silhouettes of images. Get rid of images because it's basically modifying silhouettes. The noun is silhouettes. And then such as the outline of a face is again, a cordoned off secondary phrase. The real subject is silhouettes. Does the verb appear make sense with the subject here, silhouettes? Or do you need a different verb? Well, let's go here. Silhouettes begins appearing, starts to appear, appears. What do you think the right answer is on this one? Okay, is silhouettes plural?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, are any of these plural, or are they all for a singular subject? Begins, starts, appears. Right, Jim?
Therefore,
They're all
singular
singular,
subject.
right? So the only one that's plural is appear. And it has to go with silhouettes. So they put all this stuff in between to confuse you, but really, this is the subject and this is the verb. Silhouettes appear. So it has to be appear because it goes along with a plural noun. Got it? She pinches sand onto the glass to draw, that's kind of put in quotations because she's really not drawing, she's manipulating sand, to draw facial features and other small objects. So see how this and other is like cordoned off by commas? Do you agree with that? Or do you think those commas are unnecessary? How would you write this? She pinches sand onto the glass to draw facial features and other small objects. Do you think this needs to be separated by commas? Or not? Anybody, take a guess.
C.
Let me look. To draw facial, there's a comma there, honey. You don't need that comma. So what do you think the right answer is? She pinches sand onto the glass to draw facial features and other small objects. Do you need a comma anywhere in this sentence? No, you don't. D is the right answer. Okay? Because there's no reason in the world why you would separate this out. This, it's features and other small objects. So it's perfectly fine to do this in a continuous fashion. These commas just get in the way of the flow of the sentence, and they're completely unnecessary. You're not listing anything. Would you say, Jim and John went to the store? You wouldn't say Jim, comma, and John. You'd say Jim and John went to the store. So facial features and other small objects. Okay? So the right answer to this is you don't need any commas, and the answer is D. Okay? Okay, 36. When she wants to create less defined images, such as a grove of trees or a snowfall. So this is appropriate, because this is definitely a dependent clause, right? So cordoning this off with commas makes sense. When she wants to create less defined images, she dusts sand onto the glass with light shakes of her hand. So this should be cordoned off with commas. So that would be no change, but let me see what else they offer. Oh, they offer a dash and a comma, asymmetric, right? If you're going to put a comma here, you need a comma there. A dash here, you need a dash there. You don't want to have two different punctuations on either side of the phrase. So that's wrong. Images such as a grove of trees, comma, or snowfall. The comma's in the wrong place here. It should be at the end. Okay, again, you don't need a comma between this or that. So you wouldn't have a comma internally. It would just be at the end of the clause. Okay, images, comma, such as a grove of trees or a snowfall. You need another comma there because you have to separate it off on both sides. So the only right answer is the answer that's here. So 36 is no change. Okay. Yahav's hands move fluidly. Then here's a semicolon, not pausing while a story is being told. Okay, what's the test for semicolons? We've been through this. It has to separate two complete sentences that are very closely related. So let's check this side of the semicolon. Yahav's hands move fluidly. Yeah, that's a complete sentence. Subject, verb. Okay, adverb. Now let's see if this side is a complete sentence. Not pausing while a story is being told. Nope. It's definitely not a complete sentence, right? It's a sentence fragment. So we know that this is not right the way it is. So what choices do we have? Okay. We have fluidly, comma, they do not pause, comma, while a story is being told. First of all, this comma is wrong, right? And so is this one. So B is wrong. C, they move fluidly, semicolon, they do not pause while a story is being told. Yeah, that's a complete sentence. So if you put that here, fluidly, semicolon, they do not pause while a story is being told. You have a complete sentence before the semicolon and after. So this C looks right, okay? Then we look at D, fluidly, not pausing while a story is being told. This is a run-on, fluidly, not pausing. It's confusing, fluidly, not pausing. So what you want to have is this break so people can like absorb that they move. She moves her hands fluidly. And then the semicolon, they do not pause while a story is being told. Okay, so the right answer here is C. All right, Now we move on. Scenes during Yahav's 4-minute story, You've Got a Friend, that's the name of the story, illustrates many of her techniques. Scenes illustrates. Does that make sense? Or should it be illustrate?
Illustrate.
Yeah, scenes are plural and they illustrate, they don't illustrates. A scene illustrates, but scenes illustrate. Now, illustrate many or illustrate much. This is a big deal here, because we know that the singular is wrong, right? But now we have two that go with a plural noun. Scenes illustrate, scenes illustrate. We can either say much of her techniques or many of her techniques. Which one would you use if you were writing this? Would you say much or many, and why? Anybody? Many is right. And why would you say many instead of much?
It sounds more right.
It's right, because it sounds right. Well, here's the thing. Here's the rule. Because you can count her techniques. I can say there are too many dishes on the menu, because I can count how many there are. But I can also say there's too much water in the bathtub, because I can't count the water. So when you use many, it's because you can count them. And when you use much, it's just because you're saying a large amount, which it's not a countable entity. So in this case, her techniques are countable. And therefore, many is appropriate. Good job. So illustrate many. The right answer here is J. Using just the side of her hand, comma, and that's correct, right? Because it's an ing clause, set it off by a comma. Yahav transforms the image of an orange resting in an open palm to that of the face of a young woman, comma, her head resting on her forearm. Okay, so there is no underline here, so we know that's correct. Facial features, along with a teardrop near one eye, appear when Yahav pinches bits of sand into place on the face of a young woman. Now, we already said face, facial features, right? So now we're saying face again. Should we do that? Or doesn't that seem awkward?
We shouldn't do it.
Yeah, it's not good writing, because you've already said facial features. So why would you then say on the face? That's totally unnecessary. So we know that this is wrong. The question is, what are we going to replace it with? So 39, all right? To form the woman's eyes, nose, and other facial features. Again, we don't need facial. During the 4-minute performance, too non-specific, right? Delete the underlined portion and end the sentence with a period. Okay. Facial features, along with teardrops, a teardrop near one eye, appear when Yahav pinches bits of sand into place, period. You don't need this. It's totally redundant and unnecessary, as are these other answers. The only right answer is to just end the sentence with a period. You've already said what you need to say. You know that she's working on the face, and you know that she's pinching sand into place to make features of the face. So all of this is junk. This is the kind of writing that makes teachers sick. When they see this, they're like, oh God. So they want it clean. Say it once, don't say it 3 times in the same sentence. So a period is what you do here, and you get rid of that. A steady sweep of Yahav's hand, then outlining the silhouette of a second female face. Okay. A steady sweep of Yahav's hand, then, okay, outlining, or let's look at the other choices of hand, then outlines, hand to outline, hand outlining. What do you think is the correct tense for this? If you use this sentence, a steady sweep of Yahav's hand, then what?
Like J?
Okay. No, an ing expression is not needed here. Okay. The sweep is the subject, right? The steady is an adjective. Sweep is the subject. That's the noun. A sweep does something. If I said to you a sweep does something, what would you say? What would the right form here be? Just a
Be?
simple, it's just a simple sentence, a sweep. And you wanted to use this verb in the present tense. A sweep does what? Outlining? What form of the verb would you use?
Outlines?
Yes, yes. Because a sweep is singular. You need the present tense, right? Because you're using the word then here. So it does this, then it does that, right? So you still have to use the present tense when you use this word then. And outlines is the only thing that makes sense grammatically, because this is a singular noun and this is the present tense form. This stuff is not present tense. To outline, hand outlining. You don't need this. It's just a simple outlines, a sweep outlines. Okay, so a steady sweep of the object's hand then outlines, and you do not need the comma. And you notice there is no comma here. Okay, so this is wrong for a couple of reasons. And these two are wrong. The only right answer is a steady sweep of the object's hand then outlines the silhouette of a second female face. A second female face on the right-hand edge of the glass. So we can either leave face, or we can say face in addition to the first. Well, we don't need to say in addition to the first because we said second. So that's useless. A second female face outlined in the sand. Okay. Do we need to say that? Don't we know that we're already working with sand? This is again redundant, right? And do we know that it's a face of a woman already? Yeah, it's a female face. So all your information is right here. A second female face. Okay. Plus we know that she's working with sand. So all three of these are totally redundant and unnecessary. Second in addition to the first? Well, why would you even say that? You already said second. Sand, we know she's working with sand. Why do you need to say that again? And a face of a woman, well, we know it's a female face. Again, you're saying it twice. B, C, and D are totally unnecessary. So the only right answer is second female face on the right-hand edge of the glass. Okay, so it's correct the way it is. So 41 is no change. All right, next Yahav uses smooth, winding motions with 4 fingers to great effect, transforming the first woman's limp hair into curls. With one swipe of her index finger, comma, Yahav smudges out the woman's tear. Still, she flicks both hands to add at once flowers to the woman's hair. Still, no. She's doing a series of things, right? Still is like, although Jim had short legs, still he was a great runner. It's usually a response to something surprising or something unexpected is happening. Even though this is going on, still he can do that. Even though he was short, he could reach above the refrigerator, that kind of thing. So still is definitely the wrong word here. Okay, because she's listing a bunch of things. She does this, she does that, next she does that. She creates the limp, the hair goes into curls, and then she makes a tear. So it's a whole list of things. So what word do we want here at the end of the list? Consequently, nevertheless, or finally?
Finally.
Yes, finally, she flicks both hands to add at once flowers to the woman's hair. What does at once mean? It means simultaneously, at the same time, at once. Okay, so we got to look at this and say, does this belong here, or does it belong after the word hands? Let's do it after the word hands. Finally, she flicks both hands at once to add flowers to the woman's hair. Or finally, she flicks both hands to add at once flowers to the woman's hair. Which one seems right to you?
After the word hands.
Correct, because it's the hands that are being flicked at once. So you want that descriptor simultaneous to go right after the hands because that's where it belongs. So let's see if we can replace this. In order to most clearly indicate that Yahav moves both hands together simultaneously when adding flowers to the woman's hair, the best placement for the underlying portion would be where it is now, no. After the word hands, yes. After the word flowers, definitely not. After the word hair, definitely not. So the right answer is hands, B. Good job. Yahav plans and memorizes every frame of her stories, outlining the scenes on a storyboard similar to the kind filmmakers use. Look at the reference to filmmakers, very important. As she explains, I use only my hands, my fingers, and my soul. Okay, let's look at this. Which of the following statements, if added here, would provide the most logical transition from the preceding sentence to the last sentence? So the second to last sentence would go right here. We have a reference to filmmakers here in the sentence before. And now we're finishing up and she's comparing herself to filmmakers, saying, I don't use film, I only use my hands, my fingers, and my soul. So which of these sentences would fit in between here as a transition? Though Yahav uses sand to create images on the glass, she likens her art to the act of dancing. No, because we're talking about filmmaking. As Yahav tells a story on the glass, though, the images she creates overlap and eventually erase each other. That doesn't really address the filmmaking motif. Unlike many filmmakers, though, Yahav keeps her audiences mesmerized without using complicated digital effects. She doesn't use complicated digital effects. What does she use? Her hands, her fingers, and her soul. So the best transition, it would be H. This is totally a non sequitur. It doesn't even have anything to do with this transition. The transition is storyboard like filmmakers use, but unlike filmmakers, I don't use complicated techniques. I just use my hands, my fingers, and my soul. So the right answer here is H. If you're a good writer, that's how you do that. Now, question 45 asks about the preceding passage. The writer's considering adding the following sentence to the essay. She might toss a fistful of sand across the glass to create a stormy night sky or a dark background. So it's a technique thing, right? How she's creating these images. And where, does anyone done this in advance? Do you know what the right answer is here? Has anyone looked at this? B is the right answer. So let's go and look at this, okay? We're talking about tossing sand across a glass to create a stormy night or a dark background. So it's a technique thing, right? So if we go back to B, I think we're going to see that it's a series of techniques. There's A. The hell is B? Can you guys see B? There it is. Okay. She pinches the sand onto the glass to draw facial features small. When she wants to create less defined images, such as trees or snowfall, she dusts sand in the glass. Okay. And right here, she would say she throws glass to create stormy nights. Makes perfect sense because what we're doing here is cataloging a sequence of techniques. So that sentence at the end about throwing sand across a glass to create a stormy night is another technique, and that's where it belongs, right where that B is, right on that list of different techniques that she uses. So that's the right answer. Okay, guys, that you see, these things are not easy, they're pretty tough. So I have to stop sharing now, and I have to pull up the vocabulary list, which I am going to try to pull up if I can. My computer was just on the blink here. It was not behaving itself. But we have a good vocabulary list, so I definitely want to get to it. We have some great etymology. Let's see if I can get this computer to behave. I need to do one of those cleaning jobs on the hard drive, you know, so it gets just speed it up. I'll have to get PC-Matic or something. Clean up my hard drive. Okay, we got it. So let me just get rid of this and we'll hit share and we'll get right to the vocabulary list. Here we go. Good job. Skip sign in for now. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. And get rid of that. There we go. Okay, the word smother, S-M-O-T-H-E-R. What does it mean to smother?
To suppress.
Yeah, you can smother the sound of a gunshot. So you smother the sound and you suppress the sound. Also, what else does smother mean? Something that's not so nice. What happens when you smother a person or an animal? What are you doing? You're covering.
You make them shut up.
Yeah, you're covering their nose and mouth, and you're basically suffocating them so they can't breathe. So you're right. Smother is to definitely reduce a sound, to smother a sound, or you can smother a fire with sand. But also, the word smother can refer to a person or an animal having their face covered so they can't breathe, suffocating them. Okay, cranny, C-R-A-N-N-Y. What is that?
A narrow space.
Yeah, small narrow space or opening. And you always hear it together with nooks. Like if you talk about an oatmeal cookie, it's got a lot of little edges in it, indentations. You say, oh, this is a delicious cookie with all these nooks and crannies. It's not a smooth surface. So it's a little narrow space. But you can refer to nooks and crannies like in a cookie, okay? Aplenty. That's an old word that no one ever uses. We have candy aplenty here on Halloween. What does that mean?
An abundance.
An abundance of it. We have lots of candy. We have candy aplenty. But you'll never hear anyone talk like that anymore. But it's kind of a fun old way of describing having an abundance of something. Okay, acumen. What is acumen?
The ability to make good decisions.
Yes, and accurate assessments and good decisions. Yeah. So you make good judgments, decisions, and so on and so forth. And you could say he has a lot of chess acumen. So if he's really good at chess, he can look at the board and he can assess the situation. He can make good judgments and good decisions about what his next move should be. So that's chess acumen. And so you use that, or you could say something like he has a lot of business acumen when he's running his business. He knows when to put new merchandise up. He knows when to hire or fire people. He knows how to do his accounting properly. He has acumen for business. Usually refers to a specific area of human endeavor. Chess acumen, business acumen, computer acumen. He's really good with a computer, that kind of thing. Okay, adamant. To be adamant means what?
Unyielding.
Refusing to change your mind. Very unyielding. Immovable. Very firm. He was adamant about relocating the emergency room to the other end of town. So he really, you're not going to change his mind. He knew the answer. He was adamant. Okay, good. And to admonish someone is to do what?
Don't poke my.
To reprimand.
Yeah, to scold them, to strongly advise them. Like, I admonish you to stop picking your nails. That's kind of another way of using it. But generally, you could say Jimmy was admonished for sticking his hand in the cookie jar. His mother said, don't do that, that kind of thing. That's admonishing. But you could also give somebody advice, like I admonish you to go to bed early every night, that kind of thing. Okay, adumbrate. What does it mean to adumbrate? That's a tough word.
Foreshadow.
It's to present an outline of something or to foreshadow something, to indicate something faintly, to adumbrate something. Like if somebody outlined a project, they would adumbrate the project. They're not giving you every detail, every feature. They're just kind of giving you like a kind of a hazy image of what they're talking about. Or like if the light in the room is not really bright, it's very dull, very dim, then maybe you could say the walls were adumbrated by the weak light. They were barely showing, just kind of faint outlines of the wall. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting word, and we're going to talk about that word. Okay, adverse. What's something that's adverse?
Hostile.
Yeah, it's harmful. It's unfavorable. It's not good. It's disadvantageous. You could say something like the policy to let all criminals go without bail had an adverse effect on the incidence of crime. So when you stopped having bail, everybody got out, and more crimes were committed. So it had an adverse effect. Okay, negative effect, harmful effect. Affluent. What does it mean to be affluent?
Wealthy?
Yeah, rich, prosperous, wealthy. So you could say, oh, that's the affluent part of town. All the houses are really big and everybody drives a fancy car. They're very affluent. Good. And the final word is aggrandize. To aggrandize means what?
To make it bigger or fancier?
Yeah, to increase the power of the status or the noticeability. The queen's huge crown aggrandized her majestic greatness, right? But a lot of times you use this as self-aggrandizement. And people say, don't self-aggrandize. Don't be a braggart. Don't say that you're better than you are. Don't pretend to be something that you're not. Don't be self-aggrandizing. So you'll often hear it in that context. Okay, so look, our two words are adumbrate. I'm going to go through this real quick because we're okay. I've got 4 minutes. Adumbrate. Okay, this is Latin. This comes from Latin. A means to, in this case, to, two, and umbare. Okay, umbare means to cast a shadow or a shade. So you're not showing the details, the bright details of everything. You're showing kind of an outline or a faint image of it. So that's where we get to cast a shadow, to adumbrate. Okay. Now, other words that are similar, umbrella comes from the same root, umbrare, from Latin. What does an umbrella do when you open it and put it over your head? It casts a shadow, right? Or penumbra. What's a penumbra? Penumbra is like this shroud, this thing that surrounds you. Like, you know, Pigpen from Peanuts from Charlie Brown? Pigpen is the guy that doesn't take a bath. He always has a penumbra of dust around his head. Something that kind of floats around you and surrounds you. Penumbra. Again, umbrare, a shadow. So you got to think of umbrella, adumbrate, penumbra. All of them use this UMBR construction, and they're all connected from this idea in Latin of casting a shadow. Okay, so that's the word adumbrate. The second one we're going to look at is adamant. Adamant is Greek. Okay, and where a in Latin, okay, means to, a in Greek means without. Okay, so you got to know whether you're talking Latin or Greek. So a is without, and then this is daman. In Greek, damos is to tame or to subdue. So without taming or subduing. In other words, person's adamant, you can't change their mind. They're very forceful, you can't quiet them down, can't tame them. So without being able to tame them, and adamas in Greek, A-D-A-M-A-S, means hard and unbreakable. So again, not able to tame, not able to subdue. So this is where you get adamant from. And by the way, a daman, right? What does that word look like, daman? It's a type of gem. It's a type of precious gem. What would that type of precious gem be? What does that look like? D-A-M-A-N.
Diamond.
Exactly. And what's the hardest substance in the world, most unbreakable? Diamond. Diamond, you can scratch, you can cut steel with diamond. Diamond is the hardest substance in the world. So it's no coincidence that daman in the Greek, which essentially means to tame or to subdue, right? You cannot tame or subdue a diamond. It's the hardest thing. Adamas means unbreakable. And adamas evolved into diamond. Interesting, right? Diamonds are breakable, but you got to hit them at the right angle with a chisel. You have to break their structure. They have a geometric structure. It's pure carbon. Isn't it amazing that pure carbon is coal, right? Coal is black and soft and smudgy. But if you put the carbon atoms into I think it's a tetrahedral configuration, that's totally uniform, it turns into this clear, hard substance known as diamond. It's really quite amazing. Okay, guys, we're all done. Any questions? All right, well, have a great week, learn a lot, and we'll see you next Tuesday night. Take care, everybody.